There were stories of monsters on the Caspian Sea, not myths, but machines. Western satellites caught grainy images of something enormous skimming just above the water. Too low to be a plane, too fast to be a ship. The CIA didn't know what to call it, so they gave it a name, the Caspian Sea Monster. Its real name was the KM, the first great Soviet Ekranoplan. Completed in 1966, it was the largest and heaviest aircraft in the world. 92 meters long, a wingspan of nearly 38 meters, and a maximum takeoff weight of 544 tons. To put that in perspective, it was heavier than a Boeing 747, decades before that plane even entered service. Powered by 10 Dobrynin turbojet engines, the KM could reach 500 kilometers per hour, with some test pilots claiming it briefly touched 650. It didn't fly high, only 5 to 10 meters above the water, but that was the point. In ground effect, drag is reduced and lift increased, making huge vehicles surprisingly efficient, and flying so low meant it was invisible to most NATO radar systems. For the Americans, this was terrifying. A vehicle the size of a battleship, moving at jet speeds below the radar horizon. What was it? A troop transport? A missile platform? A nuclear delivery system? Declassified CIA reports show how rattled they were. This wasn't an aircraft, and it wasn't a ship. It was something new. Inside the USSR, it was seen as a triumph of Soviet engineering. Its designer, Rostislav Alexeyev, had already pioneered hydrofoils. The Ekranoplan was the next step. Officially classified as a ship, the KM was launched like one, with champagne smashed against its nose. It was even operated by the Soviet Navy, though flown by Air Force test pilots. And yet, the Caspian Sea Monster had problems. Flying at just a few meters above the water left no room for error. A sudden wave, a gust of wind, or a misjudged maneuver could be catastrophic. And in 1980, that's exactly what happened. A crash ended the KM's career. It sank into the Caspian, too heavy to recover, where it still lies to this day. But the dream wasn't dead. In the 1980s, the Soviets unveiled its successor, the Lun-class Ekranoplan, 74 meters long, weighing 286 tons empty, with a wingspan of 44 meters. Powered by 8 Kuznetsov NK-87 turbofans, each producing 28,600 pounds of thrust. It was smaller than the KM, but far more dangerous, because this wasn't just an experiment. The Lun was a warship. On its back sat 6 P-270 Moskit missiles, supersonic, sea-skimming cruise missiles that could destroy NATO carriers. At 550 kilometers per hour, the Lun could skim over the horizon, launch a missile barrage, and vanish. Crewed by 15 men carrying 100 tons of payload, it was the world's only operational missile-carrying Ekranoplan. NATO analysts were stunned. They dubbed it a flying missile ship. The Soviets, meanwhile, paraded it as the future of naval warfare. On paper, it was unstoppable. In reality, it had the same fatal flaws. To maintain ground effect, the Lun had to fly just 1.5 to 3 meters above calm seas. But the Caspian, like any sea, was rarely calm. In rough weather, the Lun was useless. It couldn't climb higher, and it couldn't adapt. Only one was ever completed. A second hull was under construction. But this one was different. Named Spasatel, or the Rescuer, it was meant to be a flying hospital ship. Capable of carrying medical equipment, doctors, and hundreds of wounded soldiers to safety. An Ekranoplan designed not for war but for saving lives. But by the early 1990s, the Soviet Union had collapsed. Funding disappeared. Construction stopped. The unfinished Spasatel still sits abandoned in a warehouse in Nizhny Novgorod. The single Lun entered service in 1987. By the late 1990s, it was retired and left to rust at Kaspiysk. Then, in 2020, in an attempt to tow it to a museum, the Lun ran aground on a beach in Dagestan. And there it has remained ever since. A 286-ton Cold War relic, slowly rotting away under the waves. Tourists climb inside, graffiti marks its fuselage, and drone footage has turned it into an internet curiosity. The beached Soviet sea monster. The Ekranoplan was supposed to revolutionize war at sea. To NATO, it was a nightmare. A radar-proof missile ship that could appear out of nowhere. To Soviet engineers, it was proof of their ambition, their ingenuity. And yet it was crippled by the very physics that made it possible. Too fragile, too limited, too impractical. The Caspian Sea Monster and the Lun remain extraordinary feats of engineering. But they are also symbols of the Soviet Union itself. Bold, expensive, spectacular, and ultimately unsustainable. They wanted monsters. What they built were myths, and those myths now rust away on the shores of the Caspian.